So we can start. Thank you everybody to be here. In name of Plus, I would like to thank you for Ukraine Pavilion for the support and the badges. And we are working together in some projects with Virginia and ICANN. And our panel today will be rebuilding for future just transition pathways for a resilient and inclusive recovery. Just transition is one of the most important topics this year here in Belém. If I can give a spoiler for a colleague that is working on negotiations, they said that he said that just transition is one of the agenda that is actually it's going further and advancing. So maybe we can get nice results from here. And today I have some nice panelists that can bring a lot of insights and meaningful discussions for us today. I would like to introduce Professor Dr. Mіхаель Roді, Executive Director for ICANN, Maria Joao Pereyra Rolím, Visiting Scholar at Sabin Center for Climate Change Law at Columbia University, and partner at Rolím Advogados Brazil, Virginia Kopska, research affiliate from University of Geneva and associate with ICANN, and Erika, that will be with us online, and she's a researcher at the Stockholm Environment Institute, say, and a change that happened today with us will be Marina Timbaluk from EcoAction. And for start the discussion, I would like to ask to Professor Michael Roді about the concept of just transition. In the beginning was more about labor issue, but today it's become a broader concept about how countries address the necessities for development, how justice is distributed, and how power works in the climate change. And I would like to ask for you, Dr. Michael, do you think a wider interpretation make the concept stronger and more relevant, or it's just risky and make too vague to drive a real change?
First, thank you very much for having me here. Indeed, I'm having a nice research institute in Berlin. You are all welcome to make a stay there or to join our teams. Yevgenia is with us as a doctoral student. This is an institute with 60 people in Berlin working on the law and policy framework of energy transition. Yeah, I was studying and checking the just transition approach in the European Union. This was my task, and I liked very much your broad decision or your broad definition of having not only distributive justice in it, but also procedural justice, recognition justice, restorative justice, intergenerational justice, and international global justice. And looking into the EU law and policy framework, it gets clear on the one side that just transition is acknowledged as a need. The latest from the Green Deal, it was officially announced. So we are heading, European Union, heading towards decarbonization in 2050, maybe negative afterwards. And this means a really comprehensive, full transformation of the economy and the society. Nothing will be like it was before. And only if this goes in a just and fair way, we will be able, law will be able to manage these far-reaching goals. When you look at the word for first question, when you look into the law and policy framework, you see that mainly distributive justice is addressed. The topic Ursula von der Leyen has once coined, leaving nobody behind. And you have an even closer look to it. You see that a lot of funding, billions of euro go into the idea of leaving nobody behind. No region, no people should be disadvantaged by the transition. And here we have a lot of money involved, and it's working. The weaker part is the narrow definition of just transition to make people better than they were before, like fighting poverty and so on. This I only found very on the side in some legal acts. And later on we can discuss EU is a bad guy in that way, that just transition is really nicely made inside the European Union for the European Union. It gets weaker. We will later definitely discuss when it comes to intergenerational justice and even more international justice. There, the European Union is not a role model. So far for the first round.
Thank you, Mikael. And this is very important because I had followed some negotiation discussions, and one of the main topics of divergence was the definition of just transition and how we can build a mechanism without having a common understanding of what is just transition. So I would like now to pass to Maria Joao, and Maria Joao has years of experience in the private sector, and she can give real insights about how the just transition is being approached by the business sector. So please.
Hi, everyone. It's working? Yeah, it's okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. Thank you very much for the invitation. It's always a pleasure to meet you again and Professor Michael, and to be here to discuss this topic with you and also all here. Well, I think I'm a lawyer in Brazil. I have a law firm here, but I also an academic and do visit scholar and have a PhD. And the thing is how to incorporate this idea, which seems to be a lot of academic concept, to the real world and the business, and operate with the private sector and give you an idea about what's happened here in Brazil in terms of big companies. We can see that it's really just transition gaining the moment now, about the concept, about all the phases that Professor Michael talked to us. They are intertwined and interdependent, like the distributive, procedural, recognitional, restorative, and we call also transformative one, the ones that really address the structure inequalities that we have to face. But in Brazil, when you go to the companies, and they are very committed on paper, as I say, to deliver shared prosperity and also the idea of just transition, it becomes more than the regulatory side of it has an impact on them. So when you have a regulation that incorporates these elements of just transition, they will impact the business directly because they will follow. On the other way around, it's much more difficult. If just the companies decide to invest or promote just transition, they will be much more, let's say, without a framework, a tight framework. That's why we say that the case of Brazil specifically, we kind of have in law and policy that incorporate the idea of just transition. To give you an idea, the national climate adaptation in Brazil, it has the just elements like recognition of territorial inequalities, promote a robust consultation procedure as well, And the business initiatives respond to that, doing projects. So I also bring here a study that I coordinated for the infrastructure in Brazil, and I'll leave it here, and you have the code. Oh, thank you. And they will send loads of examples that they are doing something, but implementation is far from delivered, actually. There are a lot of problems. Sorry, it's kind of a lot of problems with execution capacity gaps, that the policy cannot be implemented properly, and financing is still really a problem, because financing is still directed everything, as Professor Michael said, to just distributive justice. It doesn't address properly inequalities, structural inequalities that we have, and to make people better in life. So let's, at this moment, stay from here. But in a nutshell, no, you are really far from implemented properly the concept.
Maria, you was talking about finance, and with this, I would like to bring Erica to this discussion to talk about finance a little bit. Across Eastern Europe, the security problems are increasing, and countries, to protect themselves, they are increasing the spending in security. So we still have space, fiscal space, for using fiscal policy for other things like just transition. How we can balance this type of things?
Hi, everyone, and thanks so much for addressing the question to me. Can you hear me well?
Yes, we do.
Yeah, perfect. So I will continue very much connecting across time zones and continents from another side of the ocean, but it's a pleasure to be with all of you. And my name is Erika Cherkashina, and I represent Stockholm Environment Institute, or SEI, which is an international non-profit research institute that tackles environmental and sustainable development challenges. And our, so to say, umbrella mission is to bridge science and policy and to support evidence-based decision-making. And we are a global organization with 8 centers, with HQ in Stockholm, and the closest center to where most of you currently are, I believe, in Bogota, Colombia. But I'm based in Estonia, in Tallinn, and I work primarily on supporting just green transitions in the Eastern Partnerships region and Ukraine specifically. And today we talk foremost about Ukraine. In Ukraine and also in the Eastern Partnerships region, we live inside what we call a polycrisis, where war, energy insecurity, economic shocks, and accelerating climate risks is all happening at once. And defense spending naturally dominates public budgets. In Ukraine, it's over a third of the GDP. I believe it's 34% of the GDP is dedicated to defense. And we also see Nordic and Baltic states increasing their financial commitments to the defense sector. So I think the question that we are dealing with at the moment is, how do we protect people today without undermining the resilience and the justice that are ultimately essential for a safe, resilient, and sustainable future? And the answer for me, and I strongly believe that it lies in the fact that resilient, fair, and decarbonized society is also a safer one. So I believe we should not be treating defense and community resilience and climate resilience as competing agendas, but rather look for synergies within the sectors. So, for example, energy independence is both a defense and a climate goal. Social fairness strengthens cohesion and trust and serves as the glue of the national security, as trust into one's government is of paramount importance for national sovereignty. And decentralized renewable energy systems make critical infrastructure harder to disrupt. And unfortunately, we've, especially in the recent months, but also throughout the years of the full-scale invasion in Ukraine, we've seen targeted attacks on energy infrastructure that have undermined both security, but also people's well-being and to some extent resilience as well, since electricity is such a prevalent aspect of our lives today. So I believe that every euro invested in just resilient systems can also strengthen security if it is designed in that way. And in a way, there is no better example than Ukraine for showcasing that defense and rebuilding goals can go hand in hand with the green transition. For Ukraine, it's clear today that the green transition is not just about reducing emissions, but it is about sovereignty, energy independence, economic resilience, and the terms on which Ukraine participates in the European and global economy, which ultimately will also determine how Ukraine is rebuilt. So in Ukraine, what we witness, it's not climate policy as an obligation, it's climate transition as a state building. I think I will stop here for now, but I can then share as a part of as we continue the discussion, maybe some more examples and more hands-on results, if that's appropriate.
Sure, Erica, thank you for your thoughtful insights. And we're gonna still talking about Ukraine situation. I would like to bring Virginia to talk about the access to finance. That is very important to active the just transition. But if it's not properly designed, this mechanism could be a debt trap. So how can the country avoid the risk of insert that finance and that really supports longer recovery and transformation?
Yeah, thank you very much for this question. And actually, it is very interesting that you ask this question like somebody who is a legal scholar. But echoing on what Erika mentioned, it's the thing that financing and every single euro should be spent in order to support the recovery and reconstruction of Ukraine. And as Maria mentioned, just transition is very much underdeveloped mechanism these days. So if we ensure and if we marry these both, spending euros into the green recovery and thinking how to advance these mechanisms, we should understand that it is the just transition that should be in the core of Ukraine's green recovery. And by this, I mean, we can come up with some innovative legal instruments for that. But again, as I started as a legal scholar, I don't think that it is only the legal instruments that are there in force. And because of Ukraine's external, external growing debt due to the full Russian-scale invasion of Ukraine that now actually equals to more than 120% of Ukraine's GDP and projected to be more, and with the huge reconstruction needs that are foreseen and have already been calculated, and it would take quite a big union of international partners to help us with the reconstruction needs according to the assessment of the World Bank. We should always keep in mind that the money that is allocated to the reconstruction and recovery projects should not prioritize the rebuilding of the infrastructure itself, because behind the infrastructure, behind the destroyed assets which we have in Ukraine, we have people. And just transition is about the people, as Michael mentioned, that nobody is left behind. But how to support these people on the ground means helping them with the proper financial programs and to ensure that the recovery projects embedding just transition allocate this finance to these local initiatives, to the local people on the ground, supporting the subnational cooperation, supporting the knowledge exchange, and supporting the creation of the green jobs. Because according to the estimates, the green recovery of Ukraine can generate around 4 million jobs. And green jobs, these are exactly one of the key enablers of the just transition principle as it is. So once we actually calculate in mind, it is every single euro should be spent on ensuring that the green recovery of Ukraine is grounded on the principles of just transition. And just transition is a very broad concept, that's right. And it can differ and differentiate from country to country, from the context to context, but there is something that united in both. It's like all of the concepts, that like people are in the center. And if we prioritize the shifting away business as usual, understanding the transition away from the fossil fuels, from the heavy carbonized industries, it's either the privilege of the wartime or the privilege of the country that should have this as the guiding star for every single political decision that is being made, either in Brussels, in Washington, or in Kiev.
Thanks, Virginia. And you talk about people, and this is really important. And with this talk about people, the no one left behind, I would like to bring Marina for the discussion. And can you talk more about how Eco Action is engaging with the community leadership to deliver a just transition, and talk a little bit about the Belém action mechanism for just transition that are being discussed in the negotiations.
Yeah, hi everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, honestly, and I'm representing Eco Action, which is one of the largest environmental NGOs in Ukraine, and we have this privilege to work for years with coal communities, and I'd like to talk about that. But first of all, I'd like to state the fact that Eco Action was one of the first to actually work on just transition. It all started back in 2018, when everything was abstract. The topic was seen as abstract, as something abstract, but we approached it on a systematic and strategic level, because it became clear that phasing out coal was not only a climate necessity, but it became the matter of climate justice. We realized that as Ukraine moves towards renewables and away from the fossil fuels, there are communities that will be most affected, and they must not be left behind, as was mentioned sometimes. That is why Eco Action began its work with coal mining regions in the east of Ukraine, and then we expanded our work to the center and the west of Ukraine. And in today's reality, just transition is about resilience, and it's about ensuring that communities in industrial regions, those that powered Ukraine for decades, they can now build a new, fair, and much cleaner, sustainable future. So we observed one of the strongest examples of this resilience during our annual Just Transition Forum last year, when Eco Action brought together representatives from local communities, representatives from all over Ukraine. And for example, there was a community from Pokrovsk, which is now on the front line in the east of Ukraine. And also there was a community from Sheptytsky, which is situated in the west of Ukraine. And these two communities, they cooperated for quite a long time, since 2018, with our help. They shared that this relationship and cooperation that they had built over the years, it helped them actually support each other when the full-scale invasion started, especially by evacuating people from Pokrovsk, from the east of Ukraine, to Sheptytsky, to the west of Ukraine, which is not now just about moving away from fossil fuels. It's about solidarity, and it's about support of each other. It's about unity of Ukrainian people. And also we see communities like Pavlograd develop solar energy projects to ensure energy security. And they're really close to the front line. And now is everything okay? And now they are experiencing much more frequent shellings, and it really disturbs the routine and the infrastructure, especially critical infrastructure like hospitals. And they realized the value of these distributed renewables when they can actually ensure their climate resilience and energy security. So they are now trying to make sure that this transition happens, and and they prioritize now these renewables. Such stories only stress once again that Ukraine needs just transition, and it needs it now, not after the victory. It's important. And again, it's not just about closing coal mines, but it's about something more. It's about our unity and our solidarity and support of each other that can actually save lives, as one of the examples showed. But let's talk also about legislation for a bit, because that's also important. Over the past few years, just transition has entered the national political agenda in Ukraine, and EcoAction also promoted and contributed to the state program on just transition for coal communities, coal regions until 2030. And also, we now see that there are several regional just transition action plans, including the creation of the Association of Coal Communities, which is quite crucial. It's a huge step. Again, going back to the 2018, when everything was seen as something abstract, and now we are talking about the Association of Coal Communities. That's really great, but that's still, however, only policies, only some documents that we have to turn into actions. We have to turn them into real investments, skills development programs, and support, tangible support for our communities. And that's where we go to BLM action mechanism for just transition, which is now one of the key priorities at today's COP. This is a framework for promoting just transition across economies within and between countries through international cooperation. And this will mainly focus on the coordination of just transition initiatives within UNFCCC, as well as on the provision of technical assistance. And based on our work that we did in EcoAction in Ukraine with the communities, we know that international tools can actually strengthen the work, the national work in Ukraine as well, and create more opportunities for local communities. And I'd like to seize the opportunity and to stress once again that our Ukraine delegation here should also support the establishment of this mechanism, because this is really important, and that will actually help us succeed. And G77, the group of G77 in China, already received Ray of the Day award for that, and we should not be left behind. We should enter this group of countries. And one last aspect that I'd like to talk about, because we've been talking about coal communities, but that's actually one of the challenges that we need to tackle, because right now, all this concept of just transition, especially in Ukrainian legislation, it's inextricably linked to coal regions. But just transition should not be only for coal regions. It should be for all regions that are dependent right now on gas, on oil, and on other fossil resources. And again, not only about communities, but also about industries that are dependent, like metallurgy industry. They should transition to new low carbon technologies, scale down the activities, or close down completely. And more importantly, these regions that we are talking about, fossil fuel dependent regions, they are the most affected right now by the Russia's war of aggression, because it's on the eastern Ukraine usually and on the south of Ukraine. Russia has deliberately targeted these regions. Energy infrastructure has been destroying power plants, factories, grids, entire local economies. So again, it's only like reiterating the fact that going away from fossil fuels is going toward more safe space and more secure future and safe future. So to summarize, just transition should no longer be about decarbonization in itself, because it's now inseparable from our green reconstruction, from our recovery, reconstruction and recovery. And in the current realities, we don't have to tell our communities to move away from fossil fuels, but what we need to do is to give them our support, legislative, and by implementing some great initiatives towards just transition actions to rebuild their energy systems and economies in a much cleaner and fairer way. And Ukraine's experience shows that even amid war, there are people who are ready to face this really not easy transformation only when they have support, when they have necessary knowledge for that, and most importantly, when they have hope. And I hope also that they will achieve their goals. Thank you.
Thank you, Marina. I think you brought my first question. I was asking you if just transitions is become too big, the definitions, but I think your answer brought how the nuances about the just transitions and the importance of expand the concept. And before I go to another question from Mikael, I'd like to pass to Maria João. She has some comments about your insights.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting that you mentioned the thing of the coal, because in Brazil, we had recently the just transition concept linked to the coal, new subsidies for coal, actually, instead of finishing it. It would be kind of to give more time for them, on condition that they reskill and reskill, and also the variety of the region in terms of energy. Brazil has already a very clean mix of energy. So we don't see any sense of doing this kind of mix with the concept of energy justice in order to postpone the end of the fossil fuels. We see the other way around. Of course, no one can be left behind, but to perpetuate what we've done, it's not exactly the right road. So it was interesting to see that it was born from this concept that protecting the work from there. And here, to some extent, and I warn everyone, that's a thing that we have to be aware of, the just transition concept not mixed with the idea of postpone what we have to do, move away from fossil fuels. And that's to get the gang.
Thank you, Maria. I think Erika is want to talk, but before I would like to go to Professor Mikael. And Mikael, you still talking about your research on European Union, and I would like you to talk more. How can European Union can improve the approach in just transition, and if you have some insights about the German situation, because the German passed for phased out coal plants. And now there is a backdrop because the far right wing want to say that it's a bad policy. And how the discussion is going in Germany, and if you can bring this for the discussion.
Yeah, in the end, you can say that what was already mentioned, the easiest way to approach just transition is taking a lot of money in the hand. And in Europe, you clearly see we also have coal exit, and we pay to not leave them behind. We have it also in other areas, what could be restorative justice, for example, sending money there where we have brown coal mining and completely destroyed landscapes. And also one example, I could address my doctoral student because he's doing his research on wetlands. Recognition is a huge in Brazil, apparently. But here we found also, and he made interviews, which was very interesting, those who mine the torf, the pit, yeah, they do this since centuries. And it's not only substituting the income when we are re-wetting the wetlands and try to use this also economically, but we have also to pay recognition to them. And in the end, of course, also in the global agenda, finances are number one. We have to find new tools, and this is why your approach is so good, to look into different countries and areas, because with just transition, we have a concept that reminds me very much to sustainability. And I had one of my first talks when this concept came up as a lawyer to explain what is sustainability. And I was completely lost. But with the SDGs, with more definitions, with more politics. Today we have quite a good idea what the leading star of sustainability is. Now we have, of course, to go and invent and try to suggest to the policymakers other instruments and not only finances, which are sort of the low-hanging fruit. And you need money for finances.
Erica, can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah,
of
because I
course.
saw Rains his hands up. So if you want to give
Yeah.
some, yeah, you can go.
Yeah, happy to. Thanks for the opportunity. I just wanted to build on or maybe continue Sophia's points a little bit to also emphasize that I think it is a very strongly shared opinion that Ukraine needs green transition now, also because of the fact that Ukraine is currently undergoing its EU accession or preparation for EU accession process, where a lot of policies are being changed and reshaped. And therefore, if we are talking about multi-governance framework that would embed the just transition, now is the most correct time to address it, because in the future it will kind of create extra efforts, and in a way it's not needed. It's a lot more efficient to do things kind of in one go, but at the same time, of course, not to rush and think things through and consult both experts but also local communities. And co-creation is very much the concept we like and suggest using in the context of the green transition. And also, I wanted to comment on the coal communities, also brought up by Sophia. Indeed, actually here in Estonia, I allow myself a small step to Estonia, as it is still an international panel. The situation is very much the same. We have coal mining focused on in the east of the region, that is to some extent kind of culturally also different to other parts of the country. But and we see how people who have been underprivileged for decades are now falling into an even sort of stronger or deeper pools of being underprivileged. And in Ukraine, in a way, it is very similar, but of course, in Ukraine, it's all exacerbated by the ongoing full-scale war that, as mentioned, is affecting the most strongly the east and the south parts of the country, and the front line is constantly moving. And actually, these parts of Ukraine are currently very difficult to live in. Some people choose to stay in some areas, but in fact, it is life-threatening. And what is important, I think, to note here is that a lot of these people who used to live in the east and the south of Ukraine are actually currently internally displaced people who live somewhere else. And those are also people who have formerly been working in the coal industry or fossil-intensive industry. And this is where, in my opinion, the reskilling of workers from fossil-based industries into renewable and circular economy jobs comes into play and serves as a very important factor for both success of the greener economy, but also for improved livelihoods of vulnerable people. And to a certain extent, it also goes towards the host communities who have now kind of had to deal with large amounts of people who came in, who have to be accommodated, who again have to build their lives and livelihoods in certain ways. And none of these processes are easy. All of these communities have to be involved in the decision-making processes, listened to, and participate in co-creation.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Erica. I would like to just to correct, because we are with Marina here. She's substituting Sophia, but because I think you didn't saw in the beginning. But I will take you what you talk. I think we are creating a consensus here that just transition. It's directly related with our economy platform, and I would like to bring Gina again to talk about how is important this connection with just transition in a broader prosperity agenda, because I think this will bring again for Ukraine sovereignty, a prosperity economic agenda that can make the country a long-term development.
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. And it's very interesting that Ukraine is the perfect case study for many discussions, many solutions, many challenges, and then many solutions. And when we're talking about how to ensure that we have the mechanisms that would help and enable Ukraine's prosperity with the usage of the just transition in the circumstances of war. So it's, just trying to tackle three crises all together. But at the same time, the countries worldwide, even beyond Ukraine, they're having the same crisis, the same multiple polycrisis, which we experience in different areas happening all at once. So what solutions can Ukraine come up with? These are equal solutions that any other country in the world can and should come up with. And when we're talking about just transition, it's very interesting that my early discussions, and it was academic discussions like 3 years ago, before all of this hype around just transition within COP things kicked in, people were confusing just transition with transitional justice. And back then, for me, it was kind of, oh my gosh, guys, have you tried to read the definitions? But then I started thinking, when looking into Ukraine, maybe it does make sense. Maybe if we approach the just transition via the concept of transitional justice, when we have to recover after a huge major event that questions and undermines the institutional capacity, maybe we all should see our country, states, and governments, and those who are living already in the huge challenging circumstances when we all have to go through the transitional justice as it is. Again, this comes back to the definition of what is just transition. And for me, I think when I first started to get to know this concept, it was obvious that it's not linked to the whole regions only. It must not be, because just transition, it's a lot about transformation of the economy. So answering your question, we need to ensure that the decisions that are being taken at COPs, with the help of the ICG recommendation ruling, that then they are properly implemented, because we have already this roadmap. Maybe sometimes it doesn't make sense to invent the wheel. Maybe we have already all the solutions in place. And IPCC reports long time ago gave out the pathways how we can tackle climate crisis. It was before we have overshoot 1.5. So maybe we should come back to the understanding of what sustainability is defined, how it was defined, and just see the just transition as one of the key instruments of sustainability, the concept that was adopted in 1992. Since then, we have elaborated many legal or political and policy instruments already. Maybe we should not invent the new mechanisms. Maybe we should leverage and use those mechanisms that are already in place. And if we want to make them more attractive, the title, let's call all of these already existing just transition mechanisms.
Very nice proposal. And I love this example about sustainability when the terms become, and the example that Michael gave. And based on that, with the sustainability concept came together the greenwashing. And I think with the just transition can be like a just transition, that everything is just transition, the company is going to do. And with that, I would like to ask to Erica, how we can prevent that, and if you have some insights of, I don't know, indicators of something that we can really do the assessment of just transition.
Very interesting question. Thank you so much. Sorry, what? Okay, sorry, some screen problems. All good. I believe, the greenwashing, of course, is in this context a very problematic concept. But maybe what we should start with, and what just transition could be focused on, or what could be its final aim, is also people's resilience. And I would also strongly like to second colleagues who have been bringing up reskilling and these types of topics. And for example, today in Ukraine, we see a very big need of recognizing women's contribution and to the economy, and providing necessary retraining so women are empowered to participate in professions previously dominated by men. And this is very important, as a lot of men left to the front lines and are no longer contributing to their civic occupational fields. And second, I know that Ukraine is undergoing a vocational education reform that is very necessary, so that young people, as well as those people who choose to complete retraining for any reasons and potentially for reasons that their skills have become perhaps less useful, can do it in an efficient and modern ways. And this also concerns internally displaced people who I brought up in my previous sort of input. And also, I feel like supporting rural communities is something that absolutely has to be our focus and government's focus and focus of the professionals who work in the field of the green transition, as their livelihoods are often tied to agriculture and are already under pressure from drought, soil damage, war impacts, including contamination with landmines. And again, this is something that supporting the agriculture sector and naturally people who contribute to it is essential both for social resilience, but also for thriving greener economy. I'm sorry I'm not answering your question very directly. I just feel like when we are talking about Ukraine and the context so heavily affected by the war and facing so many challenges, both in terms of sustainability and livelihoods, I feel it is a little bit difficult in this context to talk about greenwashing, as I feel like a lot of actors, and especially the national government that is so limited in its resources, is in a way already currently, I feel, doing their best in terms of efficient allocation of resources, as in fact there is no other choice. But then, of course, this is not to say that the decisions cannot be made in an even smarter way. And also to echo a little bit of what Evgenia said about Ukraine being this sort of case study, which sounds a little bit pragmatic, but on the other hand, I also believe we can all benefit from, at least in some cases, seeing it in this way. I believe me being based in Estonia and again seeing the whole of Nordic Europe and Baltic states preparing for a potential conflict, I believe Ukraine can serve for us, and maybe not even only for us, maybe for other regions affected by climate, or sorry, by both climate crisis and potentially conflict, to sort of use Ukraine or view Ukraine and study Ukraine as an example of best practices, lessons learned, what is working in this context of polycrisis, what is not working. And in a way, it is unfortunate that we have this example going on in front of our eyes, but it is there. And what we can do is we can analyze it thoroughly, we can collaborate regionally, and by that design more efficient strategies to incorporate just transition into every aspect of governance and community building, and hopefully with that minimize greenwashing.
Yeah, and it was a very tough question, and I think you was good because I think just transition, it's a thing that we are again in a new consensus here that is make a tailor-made solution for each country. There is no one approach that it can be put on practical on every country, and with this in mind, I would like to bring again Marina to talk about good practicals on just transition based on the Eco Action projects. If you can go.
Okay, you're talking about what we can do except for some
Exactly.
documents and legislation.
No, things that you are examples of things that are being made like right now in that you consider as a good example of towards just transition.
Okay, so there are lots of core communities that we've been working with, and of course there are much more communities that are dependent again on gas and oil. So what we realized during this couple of years by working with these communities that there are not enough NGOs to do this work for all the communities, because how we worked. We contacted the community, we worked with them for years, we tried to engaged them in different initiatives. We trained them, we involved them in other programs. We helped them find the donors to finance the projects of just transition in the economy, in their community. But we realized that eco-action cannot do everything by itself. So what we are trying to do right now is to have this project within which we will hold these consultations for much more communities that we could earlier take on, to pass on this knowledge, to train them how they can manage without such NGOs as Eco-Action and be much more independent. So again, earlier there was one community and one NGO like working together and going together. And now it's time for communities to work by themselves, to be more independent, to be more trained, more skilled. So again, we go to the awareness, to this just transition awareness and how this works in practice. And we hope that these consultations will help communities receive this knowledge and then pass on to other employees in the municipalities, and that they could work united and achieve this just transition goals without us. So that's what we are trying to work on right now. And in this way, we could help almost all affected communities, fossil fuel dependent communities, to work as effectively as possible.
Until I go to the last question, that I will do the same question for each panelist to answer. I would like to Maria Joao answer, but in the Brazilian perspective, thing that you are seeing in Brazil that you consider best practice.
Well, I can see that I work with the infrastructure industry, and I have all cases here. Actually, I'll live there. There are some practices and some involvement from the private companies trying to really do that, to reskilling the people and to transforming that. But I still feel that we still need a kind of a more robust idea or framework to what is a best practice. Because so far it seems to be just to fix things or even to make a little bit better. And injustice, we are talking about injustice. And what is difficult really is to address the structure injustice that we have always read, even before climate crisis, like inequalities and things that's the opportunity to do so. In Brazil, we had a case in the south of Brazil, destroyed the whole south of Brazil. It's like a war, or even worse than a war, because it's suddenly you don't have anything. I wouldn't say worse, but anyway, it's an impact like war. And even though we tried to rebuild it in a more justice perspective, and we couldn't actually. We are doing most of the things, we are kind of repeating the past. So I see best practice in place starting, but we still don't know exactly what is a best practice. And I think law can help on that, defining exactly how a policy has to consider sometimes what is priority to finance, what is important, justice in first place. And then if you can put it in policy, we'll be there to reach it more concretely, I would say.
Thank you, Maria. And now I'm gonna ask a question for the same questions for your panelists. And the question is, after the COP30, what's the opinion of the panelists would be a good result in the negotiations in COP30? And I will start with Mikael, and we can go like,
Yeah, and unfortunately, the good results are not so sexy. Sexy maybe are the finances we talked about. So it is clear that the finance flow from developed countries to developing countries is by far not enough, especially when you see vulnerable countries. Many things are technical. but extremely important, like working on concrete rules on Article 6.2 and 6.4. We are doing it quite a while. And this is, you could say, because it's really nitty-gritty things. But in this area, to set up really international climate finance through Article 6, we are quite far. And here I'm hopeful that we get some things accomplished here at the COP.
Erika, you can go.
I believe a good outcome would be for the decision makers to establish a common understanding of the fact that just transitional principles have to be embedded into global climate action and international climate action and support, which of course means involving the most vulnerable groups into decision making and dialogues on the subject, but also, which is maybe slightly less obvious, for the richer states who fund part of these processes, for the states currently undergoing the transition, I think it's also developing an understanding that there is no top-to-bottom approach, but rather it is, again, like a co-creation or collaboration, and it is a process where we have an opportunity to learn mutually and to be mutually beneficial in this sense, and therefore treat each other also as equal partners. And the case that we spoke about just a little bit earlier, where Ukraine can in fact serve as such a useful case and scenario for other parts of the world, I think it's a perfect example of how this collaboration can be established so that it is not only on paper, but also in real world beneficial for all participating parties.
Yeah, okay. What ICA Action hopes for, and now I'm basing this on the key priorities of this COP, is first of all, supporting the establishment of the BLM action mechanism. It is one of the priorities, so logically it should be supported. But already now it's the fourth day of COP, and we can see this clear division between a global north and global south, and how the one side really opposes the establishment of this mechanism, and the other side really goes towards it. And now it's really unclear how this will unfold, but I really hope that we could achieve one of these main goals of this COP. And the second one is about adaptation, the global goal of adaptation, more specifically indicators. That is also one of the key priorities of this COP. And we also hope that these 100 indicators, they will work on that, because also in terms of Ukrainian legislation, with accordance to our climate law that was adopted last year, to the end of 2026, we need to have this newly adopted adaptation plan, and also based on that, regions and communities, municipalities will also design their adaptation plans. So we would really like for the indicators to be adopted so that we could advise our government on how to take these indicators into account when implementing our national, when designing our national laws and then implementing them. So, BAM and adaptation.
Maria Joaо, can you go?
I would rather say with finance, actually. Think we need that. Not only in terms, I think a great outcome would be to have a more robust framework for finance in general, not only in terms of amount, that we need that, but mostly in terms of governance, to recognize this collaboration and the need to, because finance, sometimes you can improve the amount, but you cannot reach the good global governance to really reach where it has to reach, and to prioritize in the middle of everything justice, for sure, because it's not only something, a side effect or something that you have to fix. It's the idea, the core idea of doing all these things is to improve justice in the world.
This vision, the last but not the least.
I think I would bring like to the table one more thesis that I have already mentioned, that we have to think globally, but to act locally. And when we are thinking about the adoption of the balance mechanisms that we are looking forward to, hope that it will happen at the result of COP. But in the end of the day, as somebody who has been working like with law and with like with the businesses, I think like all of the panelist participants would relate that in the end of the day, it is the implementation, and the implementation depends on different type of factors. But as Erika mentioned, echoing her, but bottom-up approach. And what Ukraine was showing is that we have a number of already local and just transition programs that are enable local communities to implement these decisions in the action. So like bringing aside of the policy law, again, people that are in the heart of the just transition, making them educated, making them know what just transition is, and making them consciously expect the decision makers, local decision makers or international one, to have this right. And this is actually the right to life, right? Because if we don't ensure the decarbonization, if we don't ensure the just transition, we are facing the existential crisis of the humanity. So coming back to the point, educate people. This is what this COP should streamline, that more climate education should happen. More local communities should be supported to implement the project for which they have these ideas. And more experts should be involved in the decision-making on financing or how to leverage already the existing mechanisms that are already in place. We have the fantastic, very much not clear now, but Article 6 mechanism, which we can leverage for the sake of the just transition. And NDCs, this year COP is adopting NDC. The countries from all the world, this COP are like adopting their NDCs. We can adopt the best ever NDC ever. We should be sure and should be looking forward these NDCs to be ambitious, but at the same time to be really committed to tracking this progress, that this whatever ambitions are listed there, they are implemented in the decisions being taken on all of the levels of the government.
So implementation. I will start with
Hi everyone, I'm Pedro from E Plus Institute in Brazil, and I want to know, because when EcoAction mentions that community, the exchange between community, between experiences, important part of building just transition, but when that happens on a country level, and although we know that, of course, just transition will mean different things for different countries, different regions, but what kinds of forum or what kinds of mechanisms could be used to get communities on a global level to exchange their experiences on just transition and to learn from each other, even though they are not entirely similar in what they need to do?
Thank you so much for your question, really comprehensive one, but I'll try to answer. So when we talk about this global exchange of experiences and ideas, I think it's really important to have these active communities on the national level first. So Ukraine has this experience, and thanks to different NGOs and EcoAction as well, we succeeded in bringing them together and exchanging ideas across the country first. And now, if there is this global exchange, our communities are ready. So what I'd like to advise for other countries is to try to make the same, because they really have another scope of experience, and it really depends on the region that they are situated in. So first of all, be united within the country, understand each other's problems, especially when the country is big enough. Ukraine is big enough, and there is a difference between coal communities in the west of Ukraine and the east of Ukraine, but we managed to bring them together, and now they understand each other more and can support each other. So the same I would suggest for other countries. And then I think COP or COP in Bonn, that also is held each year, 2 times per year, platforms that give us this opportunity to take our communities, representatives, and to meet globally and to have these side events or to have these biannual bilateral meetings to exchange the views, ideas, experiences, maybe some suggestions for the cooperation. So I think, again, it's bottom-up approach always that is the most efficient one, I think. Thank you.
So I hope it works. At first, my name is Till. I'm PhD student of Michael. And Yakuyu for this amazing panel. I hope I pronounced it right. And I was really happy to learn something about peatlands today. Looking forward to future events in the next days. We will talk more about it. And I have 2 questions. My first one is also to Michael, because you talked about the European Union and not as a role model, as a bad guy somehow. And I wanted to ask or dive deeper into that. How can we avoid deepening global inequalities about global north, global south, about rich, about poor? Or what did you have in mind when you raised this question or framed the European Union as a bad guy? Or how would you frame it?
Thank you for the question. Internationally, the one thing we have already discussed is the reluctance of the global north to invest more, to having really a significant transfer of money. But additionally, I would be critical to the European Union to sort of not cooperation. Last days and months, there was a lot of talk that we need to cooperate more. So having diplomacy, putting diplomacy back to the middle outside the COP. But what we are doing is sometimes very one-sided. And when you look at the carbon border adjustment, the basic idea is to gain money on the one side and to force the others to increase their carbon pricing. This may work in the theory. There are a lot of problems around that, but I think it's very much criticized rightly that here the European Union is playing leader. Then they should adopt better NDCs and not. But in this process, of course, nothing is so bad that we cannot change it. There are discussions in border tax adjustment to give relief to vulnerable countries and poor countries. But I could tell you also a lot of things about what doesn't work inside the European Union. I just mentioned one thing. So I'm very astonished that it didn't pop up. So you rightly summarized intergenerational justice in the book A. And nobody talks about that. And in Europe, and especially in Germany, we have a very bad situation. There's greenwashing or just transition washing to say, we are, this is intergenerational justice when we create new, cool working places because the future generations will have advantage from it. The other side, we are spending in Europe, as you know, and in Germany especially, insane amount of money for now infrastructure. There's only one part going to climate. Insane amount of debts we are making on the cost of whom? Future generations. And this goes so far, this not thinking about instruments for intergenerational justice. Or Supreme Court told the government, no, you cannot you cannot eat up the climate budget, the CO2 budget until this level. Is freedom from the future generations, freedom of life and health and so on. And you must be more active. But it's very poor to see that the court is going in this direction because there's a huge deficit in politics.
So if I may follow up. If you want to add something, no. I would follow up with the second short question. It's more an open one to all panelists. And I wanted to ask about, according to your understanding, the most important role of law. And you touched upon it, Maria, when you said it's about providing definitions. And I wanted to ask all of you, since we have such amazing panelists over here, is it about mediating the process, about allocating finances? So what's the most important role of law in your opinion?
Well, I would say, of course, Professor Michael can add something, and all the others, I don't know you, but I know you are from the law side as well. Well, I did my PhD about reflexive regulation. That's one of the role of law in climate change. And one role is to organize the procedure aspect of it, the decision-making process, because sometimes you cannot decide the right ending. So you need a process, a procedure that incorporates everyone and has all the steps to ensure that, although we don't know the exactly balance or trade-offs that we have to do at the end, the people and the process will make sure that will be the right one for the right circumstance and right place at the moment. But law has, from this conceptual framework, we have other more practical approaches for law. For instance, to recognize exactly, to give an example, when we have a disaster or a war, how do you go and support these people? Which areas have the first support? Which are priority? Which people have priority access to this or that? Is that just or not? Is that just that a law or a policy does not consider justice criteria on the core of the new policy? So law can have this kind of checklist to see if it's acceptable or not to have it. So we have a variety of roles for law. I really believe that regulation and law, it's not only top-down if you organize the procedure, but it's the way to live in society in a more collaborative way. Like.
Yeah, thank you, Maria. Maybe I add that speaking as a lawyer, but I'm also a political scientist, whole transformation, energy and climate transformation has to go through law. Political strategies or nice cooperation between people will not be enough. And here we come to a very critical point for us lawyers. Is the law able? This is the first time that the law has a task with regulation to organize a tremendous transformation over decades. And I'm not sure whether the law is able to do it, because how can you have the question, how can you bind or make concrete the path towards 2050? We are living in democracy, so every term you have new people representing us and a new parliament, and this must have a and there's a lot to do for PhD students to design this balance of binding and still keeping open. One example is just in Germany what our institute suggested to change infrastructure law, because up to now, when you are planning electricity line or whatsoever infrastructure, gas pipeline, hydrogen pipeline, this is a process of 10 or 20 years. But what when after 10 years you realize you were on the wrong track, on the wrong scenario? And now I think we somehow convinced the government that you have to plan in parallel for different strategies and pathways. So, but we don't know how this binding in the long, binding next parliaments and keeping them flexible will in detail work out.
Yes, Virginia, want to give some thoughts?
Just one remark, because I'm like being the lawyer itself. I stopped believing in law because I'm Ukrainian, but I believe in people, and the people who interpret these laws, continuing and echoing again, the people who would be implementing these laws on the ground. So I think it's very important, because these are the people that are in the center of the just transition. These are the people that are like decision makers are people. And we had it in the previous discussion, it was fantastically brought up that if we are all reasonable adults, responsible adults, if we can take this law and interpret it in the proper way, creating the cases for the great climate litigation that is like now rising, but we have to have more people committed to the shared vision and value, and then it will work.
Until we finish, I would like to do one more question. We are taking the insights from Brazil perspective and from Ukraine perspective. One topic that I think connects two countries is critical minerals, and nobody thought yet about critical minerals. So I would like to ask for the panelists really quickly, because we have like only 15 minutes. Which questions we need to have about critical mineral exploitation in Brazil, Ukraine, and how we related this with just transition?
Well, for sure, we cannot repeat what we've done with all the natural resources we did in Africa, in Brazil, in South. Doesn't matter. Myself, I was born in Angola and raised in Brazil. So we cannot do, one thing we cannot do is repeat the idea that the same exploitation idea that we had. Apart from that, if we build robust and participation with the people local, it can be a natural resource that can give a leverage for people to build a new economy. So let's make it right.
Yeah, really important question, actually. So we know that Ukraine has so many different minerals. It's really rich in resources, and that's kind of the problem sometimes, because I totally agree that the way the resources are usually taken from the ground, this way should not happen again. But yet we are witnessing right now the same patterns with extracting mineral resources for the renewables with lithium, and that's happening in Latin America, and that what may actually happen in Ukraine really soon, because we have this deal with the US, and I'm really concerned about that, because we have, like, Ukraine has the most lithium in Europe, and I'm really concerned that the way that it will happen is just pure extraction, and the whole production processes and cycles back in the US or in other countries, but not in Ukraine. And I realized that we should maybe extract some to really expand our economy and make ourselves richer, but not our like modern colonizers that are not colonizers anymore when we talk about them, but it's like hidden colonialism, and it should not happen again. So what I'm trying to say is not be against this at all, because that's something on an impossible level. But when we are extracting these resources, we should keep the balance and make all the efforts that we can to ensure that these will go up to the secondary sector, not be left on the primary sector. And then we could economically benefit from it and ensure that these funds can be redirected to our climate finances and politics, like make something good out of it, not just simply giving away our resources to modern colonizers, like I named them.
I would also like to strengthen the international aspect because, for an exception, I praise the European Union being quite good in environmental law, environmental planning law with participation of the people. But again, what is outside the European Union, this is interesting, and we have to avoid this colonialistic exploitation approach. We have two projects at the moment starting. One is hydrogen trade between many countries in transition, including Brazil, Argentina, and around this belt. And we found it extremely strange, intransparent, and also unfair how Europeans make these deals, bilateral deals. We try to work on fair conditions, fair contracts, at least to confront them what they are doing. And very close to this is a policy approach now from Europe, a discussion at the moment, but I think it will come true to put sustainability to the trade law. So giving preferential conditions and regulating the way of mining and exploiting. And I think this could be a way of solving the problem, but at the moment the status is not very good.
Yeah, anyone? Erika, do you want to add something?
Yes, thank you. Maybe just to add, kind of zoom into Ukraine once again, and it is a fact that in Ukraine, critical raw materials will also play a central role in Ukraine's green recovery and reconstruction. So it is they will serve as a crucial element for Ukraine's rebuilding. And in this context, I believe there are several just transition and justice related principles that have to be followed. One is, for example, fair distributions of benefits, risk, and burdens. And I think this is exactly something that hasn't been done, maybe in those bad examples of countries or even the whole continents. Africa was mentioned by colleagues, where it wasn't done and where there were specific communities suffering the most severely of, for example, health risks and environmental burdens brought up by extraction. And in addition, there has to be, I believe, there has to be inclusive and transparent participation of communities, where communities are involved in exploration, licensing, instruction, as well as closure and restoration. And again, this is something that hasn't been done in many parts of the world. And Ukraine, in this case, seeing that the critical raw materials are necessary for reconstruction, Ukraine can once again, I believe, become this positive example and potentially a global leader of how the extraction, use, and closure of critical materials extraction can be done in a more fair manner that can then hopefully again be expanded to other countries facing similar situation.
And I won't take any more of the time of the respected audience here, but I would like to answering your question, we would have the dedicated panel on hydrogen and critical raw materials, like on the 15th here in Ukraine's pavilion. It will be also available to join it online, possible to join it online, and the link will be public. So those who are interested in this topic and to dive deeper in the Ukraine context, but not only, we would be like very much grateful to see you either in person or online. It would be on the 15th, if I'm not mistaken, but we should check like the agenda. So thank you very much for this, and like dive deeper into the hydrogen and critical raw materials in the current context and beyond soon.
No, now I got it. So I think with this, we can close the panel. Thank you for the audience to stay until the finish. Thank you for the panelists for the meaningful, insightful thoughts. It was really amazing. And I think it's great, this type of panels with different people from different countries, because here I see a lot of connection with the Ukraine situation, with the South country situation, with critical minerals, with the prosperity agenda. I think we need to just transition is about to create a pattern of development and prosperity that's different from the past and with better wealth distribution in the world. So thank you for everyone, and we can continue the talk outside. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much, colleagues. It was a pleasure to be a part of the panel. Enjoy the rest of discussions.
Thank you, Erica. Bye.
Bye.